Hello, everyone. We are kind of continuing our topic on economics a little bit. This is lesson 3-2. We're talking about the principles of supply and demand. These are very important principles. So again, lots to cover here. So let's get right to it. So really, when it comes down to it, so how does price affect sales? So let's say you own Isabella's bracelets. All right, you make $100 bracelets and you post them for sale on your web store for $20 a piece. Well, after a few weeks, though, you've only sold 7. Huh? Why? Why are they not selling? Okay, could be a marketing problem, meaning you aren't reaching your potential customers in your target market. Or it could be that your web store isn't easy to navigate. Okay, maybe it's hard to get around. Or it could be that your price is too high. Okay, so there are a bunch of factors that affect your sales. Maybe trends are moving away from the style of bracelet that you're offering. Maybe you're not targeting the right audience. Maybe you need to increase your promotional efforts. Perhaps there's too many competitors in the market. However, it very often comes down to one thing, and that is price. Customers vote with their purchases. Okay, some may think that the price is too high, therefore affecting the sales of the bracelets. Okay, some may feel it's acceptable. Maybe your target audience likes your bracelets, but they're not communicating the message that they like it because they're not buying it. Okay, they're not communicating, but they're communicating the message that they like. They're not communicating that they like your message because they're not buying it. What they're saying is that they think the price is too high. So, what happens then if you lower the price of your bracelets? Okay, let's say Isabella lowered her price from $20 to $14.95. Well, now her sales start to pick up. They start to go up because she's lowered her price. In fact, she sells out completely within a month, much faster than she ever expected to happen. But consider this. Would What would have happened if the price had been $16.95? Would that difference in the price been enough of that decrease in price to accomplish the same thing? Could her sales still have gone up and maybe she wouldn't have sold out all the way? And Isabella would have made more money. So now there's something called with supply and demand, there's something called equilibrium. This is the monetary state or condition where the quantity of the product supplied equals the quantity demanded. Okay, equilibrium. Okay, the supply equals the demand. Okay, that's equilibrium. So when we're talking about equilibrium, our bracelet example from Isabella demonstrate what goes on in our economy every moment, every day. In a free market system, supply and demand are always naturally seeking that equilibrium that we're talking about. So Isabella, she found an equilibrium price and she sold through all of her entire supply of bracelets. Equilibrium price is the actual price where the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. There we've got that equals again. Supply and demand are equal in that case. There's also matching that, going along with that, is equilibrium quantity. This occurs when the quantity of a product is purchased and sold at the equilibrium price. Now you have to be careful. You don't want to blink because the equilibrium does not last long at all. Okay, economy is constantly in motion and equilibrium only occurs momentarily. Equilibrium rarely has a resting state. Suppliers, competitors, consumers are constantly making decisions and choices that alter the state of the equilibrium. So we're going to talk about something called the laws of supply and demand. Now, the law of supply says that as the price of a good or a service increases, the supply for that good will also increase. And conversely, as that same good or price, or the price of that same good goes down, then the supply of it goes down. Okay, because you're not making as much profit. Now, the law of demand says that as the price of a good or service increases, then the demand for that good or service will also increase. Or sorry, take that back. As the price of a good or service increases, then the demand tends to go down. Sorry, I said that wrong the first time. I need to correct myself on that. So as the price goes up, the demand goes down. Conversely, the price of that same good goes down, then the demand goes up. Okay, that's kind of how it works. So this law of supply and demand. This is an economic theory that, assuming you've got a free and you've got an efficient market, it explains that interaction between the buyers and sellers of an item and how price motivates that supply demand. Meaning generally that when, again, the price of an item increases, supply increases, but demand falls. And when the price decreases, demand increases and supply falls. Okay, so that's where we have these two x's here. This is your supply curve. Your supply always goes up and to the right. Demand goes down to the right. Okay, so those are your two curves when you graph them. So you can have a surplus, and a surplus occurs when your quantity supplied exceeds the demand, the quantity demanded. You've got more than what people are actually buying. A shortage occurs just the opposite, when the quantity demanded exceeds what is supplied. Okay, they're opposites. Surplus is when you have more than what people want than the quantity demanded. Shortage is when you've got more people wanting and you don't have enough supply. So here's kind of this image of surplus and shortage. So initially, Isabella had a surplus on hand in her supply. So she lowered her price, and then she sold out of her bracelets faster than she expected to. Well, now she needs to make enough new bracelets to keep up with the demand at the new price. Going back to our equilibrium price, okay? Equilibrium price, to further explain it, is the moment when your supply and your demand curve intersect. That's the very moment, the state, the condition where they are equal. So again, you've got your supply curve, you've got your demand curve, you've got your equilibrium price and your equilibrium quantity. Notice how on this part of the graph is price, this part is quantity. So where these two lines, where your supply and your demand line intersect, that's your equilibrium price and your equilibrium quantity. The actual price is where the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. That's your equilibrium price. Okay? Again, take a look at the graph. All right, let's change gears slightly and talk about something called elasticity. And Isabella, in this case, learned about the elasticity of her bracelets. Elasticity means the measure of the sensitivity or the responsiveness of demand or supply of a good or service based on changes in economic factor, most usually like price. So price elasticity is the degree to which the demand for a product changes based on changes in the price. Okay? So Isabella found that her bracelets have an elastic demand, which means that there was a large change in the demand for her product based on her price, that economic factor. Her price change was $20. Wasn't selling, they weren't moving, so she lowered her price. Okay, her price went down, $14.95. The demand of the bracelets skyrocketed. It went up tremendously. Now, what other products might have an elastic demand? Well, think about these three things. Fast food restaurants and soft drinks typically have an elastic demand. If McDonald's raises its prices and other fast food restaurants don't, well, then the McDonald's sales, they're going to go down. Because fast food, McDonald's isn't a necessity. You can find fast food, or you can find a competitor, on any other corner. Okay, you can go someplace else. And if Pepsi were to double its price, okay, even diehard Pepsi lovers might switch to Coke um, or other brands because they don't want to pay that much. Okay, so the demand changes based on what the price is. This means that it's elastic. Inelastic demand is just the opposite. There is a small or no change in the demand of a product based on the change of an economic factor, again, usually like price. So here's some examples of inelastic demand. Salt, because there's really not a good alternative. Cigarettes, they are addictive, so it's hard for people to quit even if the price goes up. They're so addictive, people are still going to want to buy them even if the price goes up. Gasoline is another one that has an inelastic demand. You rely on your car to get to work, to get to church, to get wherever you need to go. Your car runs on gas. You're going to buy the gas really regardless of the price. You're going to grumble about it probably, especially if it goes up, but you're still going to buy it. Now, touching on something I barely touched on just a little bit ago when I was talking about McDonald's, there's the thing called competition. Competition is the rivalry between companies selling similar products and services, competing to attract customers because of the limited dollars that they have to spend. So how does competition affect supply and demand? If we look back at Isabella's bracelets, this is an example because many other forces might affect that supply demand and therefore the price of the equilibrium. For example, competition can put pressure on prices. Competitors seek to make more sales of the same or similar product. Okay, so she might have somebody. We'll get into an example about that later. Okay. Now, when there is this competition and everything, there's something called a buyer's market. This is a situation when economic conditions make it favorable to buyers instead of sellers. Buyers then have the advantage in the price negotiations, usually because there's an excess supply, okay, versus the demand, okay? On the flip side, there's a seller's market. Seller's market is where the economic conditions are favorable to sellers instead of the buyers. It gives the sellers the advantage in the price negotiations, and this is usually due to an excess demand versus the supply. Let's look at some examples. Okay, so your competitor to Isabella, she sells a similar bracelet for $12.95. What was Isabella's price? $14.95. Now, because there is a new supplier of bracelets and they compete with Isabella on price, trying to win customers. During the Great Recession in 2008, housing prices went down. Okay, and soon after, it became a buyer's market because there was the home values were relatively low. In 2020, 12 years later, buyers could borrow money at low interest mortgage interest rates, and then it became a seller's market because the demand exceeded how much there was. The demand exceeded the supply. This usually happens, and all of this kind of stuff usually happens in a market economic system called a free market, also called private enterprise. This is where production, wages, and prices are determined via the applications of law of supply and demand, often with little or no government regulation. And so we have something called capitalism. This is an economic system where companies are privately owned instead of being owned by the government. Okay? Capitalism, free market system. That's where companies are privately owned, there's little government, and it assumes that the companies are built with the purpose of creating economic value through innovation. They're driven by a profit motive, and where prices are set by the market and the flow of laws of supply and demand. However, the government does get involved sometimes, and the way the government gets involved is in these areas. Government regulates businesses and things like energy, utilities, transportation, water, communication. Now, if capitalism goes too far, then and companies get too big, they have too much power, it may turn into a monopoly. Now, a monopoly is where one company controls the supply of a good or a service and other options aren't available. The barriers to entry are highly restrictive. So the interaction of supply and demand is at the heart of our economy, and price acts as the equalizer. The government intends to offer protections against anything that would interfere with healthy competition so that buyers have the choices and it helps keep the prices in check. All of this, again, through supply and demand, through that free market system, through capitalism. Okay, all of that plays into thing. Government just regulates those businesses and regulates some of those things so that buyers have those choices. Okay, as I said, a lot to cover, but go back. If I went too fast, go back, review the video, okay? This was our lesson on lesson 3-2. We were talking about the principles of supply and demand, okay? And demand. Sorry, my handwriting is horrible on this thing. But anyway, go back, take a look at them, and so you can understand it more. And again, that's our lesson on principles of supply and demand.